Caribbean countries at one regional event to tackle the theme, Global Digital Disruption, Threat or Opportunity. The virtual RF Economic Outlook Conference happens on May 6th. Register today at rfeoc.com.
Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center invites you to join them on Sunday, 11th April for their first annual Turtle Crawl 5K Walk and Run. All funds raised from the event will support the conservation of green sea turtles in the Cayman Islands. So come on out and show your support. Learn more and register now at www.turtlecrawl.ky. Proudly sponsored by HSM, Rotary Central, Gatorade, and Radio Cayman.
Water Authority Cayman would like to inform its customers that the public water service in Cayman Brac will be interrupted from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. on Thursday, April 8th and on Friday, April 9th. The service interruption will take place to facilitate investigative work on the Cayman Brac distribution system. The Water Authority apologizes for any inconvenience this interruption in service may cause and thanks the public for their patience and understanding.
Speak up at the polls this general election, April 14th, 2021.
Do the right thing. Exercise your democratic right and vote. A public service announcement from your number one community station, Radio Cayman.
Talk today.
But I do have some questions.
Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, and thank you for joining us. In the studio, candidate number one on the ballot in Red Bay is Sammy Jackson. I think education and health were things you're focusing on, and with the greatest respect, they're probably, in my mind, true pillars in the economy. Without the educated, healthy populace, how can we really benefit from any of the resources, whether we were mining diamonds or excavating, for other stuff or drilling for oil? If people got to be healthy and educated, right?
Well, you're right. And I think for every Caymanian, at least, if not every human on Earth, education and healthcare should be a basic human right. Right. For any citizen of any country, because without those things, you simply cannot advance or survive. And certainly for humans of let's just say under the age of 17, at the very least, 17 or 18, before they reach the age of majority, they should be allowed to have the best education possible. Especially in a country that enjoys the kind of economic success that we often hear this one does. There shouldn't be any reason why every Caymanian child shouldn't be able to get a free education and free health care without going through some sort of social services process. Let's put it that way. And that would include a sixth form education.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a Red Bay voter last night, and that gentleman made a lot of sense. He said he was lamenting the fact that we got rid of the sixth form program, that program that you and I went to together.
Very effective.
Back in the day. Man. Without that, I would not have survived law school. I would not have known how to function in law school. It prepares you for
college. Transition.
It is transitory in that it changes the style of education. That's one of the ways we failed. Again, we sort of just, it seems to me that the education system has been under some sort of attack, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why. Part of the problem is implemented segregation, right? We have been hearing a lot about inclusion for special needs kids. That is a very noble concept and something that absolutely has to be encouraged, because it's not only important that you protect and enhance the quality of life for kids who have special needs. They should be protected first and foremost because they are more vulnerable, right? But one of the things that's really important is teaching other kids to interact with kids who are not, by their standards, normal, right? How could you possibly engender an inclusive society, a happy society, if you are going to inculcate a mindset from a very early stage where your kids are carving out people, they don't fit in, so therefore, and that line can be drawn along all sorts of lines, gender, sex, gender, same thing, race,
ethnicity, economics,
all of that, and economic status. We went to a public school where that didn't matter. And we did well. We did okay, I think. And we went to, our classmates were, they range from the richest of kids of richest of parents down to the poor little kids that were living off welfare. But we all treated each other as equals, I believe.
Yep. Got along.
Nothing is ever perfect, but generally speaking, we were all in equal footing.
Mm-hmm.
We got the same education. We shared the same facilities. There was no discrimination then, and we have regressed. And that needs to be addressed post haste, because we can't say that we're affording our children a world-class education if we are engaging in such things as segregation, right? On any level, on any basis. Now, because the only how you can have social harmony in a country that has over 130, is represented by over 130 nationalities, especially a country this size, is if you include everyone.
Everybody, yeah.
Right? We need to address that, or we are going to face the ripple effect of that in the future, resulting in civil unrest.
Social divide.
There's all of that. Yeah. And that is exactly, that destroys, that undermines, the integrity of society.
The stability, the quality of life,
all
the standard of living,
quality of life,
safety, security.
If people feel that they are, disenfranchised or marginalized, etc., because of whatever. Now, that's education. Now, the other thing that I've been tackling for a while is the lack of access, right? Fair, transparent access of qualified Caymanians to the professional jobs in the country. We've had so many complaints about that, right? It can't be that this is all made up. And we have seen instances where people have written to Parliament, people who have since established themselves on their own in their own businesses, etc., saying how they are discriminated against in terms of being prevented from getting the best jobs or getting access to proper training, etc. So you have this sort of mindset that Caymanians are taken on as token employees. That was back in the old days. Now the government of the day has advanced the needle in the wrong direction, so that there is going to be outsourcing on a wholesale basis, where half the legal firms, for example, can be located overseas. There's going to be serious economic consequences that flow from that. You've heard me address that in this very same program before. You know what my position is on that. And we need to turn that ship around in a hurry, right? Because there's no utility in educating Caymanians, sending them off to college, spending your life savings doing all that, and bring them home, and then they can't find a job that they were trained to perform, simply because they're overtrained, overqualified, that whole array of excuses. This is a failing of the immigration system of this country, first and foremost. And it's the failing of the government overall at the end of the day for not enforcing, right, the standards and requirements and policies that were promulgated in this country to protect Caymanians and to enhance their futures. And if we don't get a handle on that soon, we're going to have a serious problem in this country. When you have a growing segment of the population that is highly qualified, who don't get a fair share of the pie, that ultimately results in unrest.
Yeah, those are the people who understand the cost and consequence then and can mobilize.
Other countries, that is literally the fuel of revolution, right? So we need to protect not just the legal industry, but other industries from this unbridled outsourcing. We have the same thing in the architectural firms too. We have created legislative amendments. This government, in its predecessor form, let's put it that way, in 2014, 2016, they made a number of amendments. Among them was they allowed for anyone to submit plans to the planning department, which means that a developer doesn't have to hire a local architect. He can hire anyone he wants. Is that really what we're promoting? There's two things that two horrible consequences that flow from that. One is, first of all, you're marginalizing Caymanian businesses because they can be bypassed entirely now. There's no need for them. But more importantly, from a public safety aspect, you're literally allowing plans to be submitted by entities that you don't know. They're not physical in the jurisdiction. They're not regulated by the jurisdiction. And you're operating on the basis of faith in the developer, hiring the right people to do the right job. But what happens when you build a building one day and it can't work or it's badly designed?
Then who has liability?
Who bears that liability? I would think the government.
But then on the same token, if you go back to health, sort of health insurance legislation, you can't operate and hire or sell a policy if you not based there. But you can be an architect, submit plans, as you said, to approval.
All of these things have the fingerprints of special interest in them. This backdoor lobbying business really needs to stop. Where government takes on board things said in a closed door meeting and uses that as the basis, the platform to launch a legislative initiative without considering the consequences for the country or other people involved in the industry. That's just bad governance.
I think
no other term that describes it better.
Too many people like to knock on the back door. I think it should be, like you said, open and transparent.
Unless it's corruption. Perhaps corruption is a term you could use as well. The other sort of the connected issue with that is we need to enhance the enforcement of mandatory on-job training for Caymanians across various industries where that job is held by a work permit holder. You will remember back in the day when that was, I believe, mandated as a policy and as I think by regulations. Anyone who got a permit should the company that employs them should identify an appropriate Caymanian to shadow them to be trained up. That seems to have fallen by the wayside by all reports. We need to look into that, make sure that is we return to that concept so that in that way you organically Caymanianize the labor market in Cayman. You get Caymanians who you get. There's a transfer of knowledge from someone who comes here who's qualified, works for the time being, but it seems to be presumed now that someone who comes here qualified as an expatriate is automatically put on a glide path to permanent residence and then status, and that's okay as long as they don't displace a Caymanian along the way, right? So if that knowledge can be transferred to an appropriate Caymanian, it needs to be. We need to look at the legislation, and we need to, and if it's a lack of enforcement, we need to hold people to account for that.
We have to talk about knowledge-based industries, right?
Indeed. Yeah. When a large part of your economy is knowledge-based industry, then you need to make sure there's a transfer of knowledge. That is the one huge benefit for the country, that you gain that knowledge. And not like how the Chinese do it, maybe, but they basically steal your ideas, and I mean they're pretty aggressive about that. I'm not advocating that level, but somewhere in between that, what we have, I believe there's balance. Yeah,
but maybe that speaks to when you hire with people, you hire in qualified people who already come here with the knowledge, not people that are trained. But
indeed,
anyway, as you were sharing, so
another part of that is. Promote and enhance a certified training program, educational program for vocational jobs. That they need to be recognized too. All across the world, people go and they get certificates for all levels of vocational training. It's something they can show for their end. I believe we're going down that path now. I don't think we're doing as well as we should be. We should have been there already. We have some very competent young Caymanians who are, and we have had for a long time, who are not academically inclined, but are very good with their hands or very good with things technical, who would benefit tremendously from that. And there are many other candidates promoting this and supporting this, and I'm encouraged by that because it's something I believe needs to happen.
Yeah, those level of certifications that allow you to, be employed here, but if you're seconded elsewhere, you want to move or whichever, they're transferable, they're recognizable.
And this sort of underpins what I said earlier about the tourism industry. We need to ensure that our Caymankind tourism brand is promoted and enhanced by protecting and promoting local owned tourism businesses. This comes out of a conversation I had with a group of local operators the other day. Their complaint was that they feel threatened. I mentioned that earlier. And it occurred to me during that conversation that the obvious thing that needs to be promoted, right, which I believe would go a long way to satisfying their concerns, let's put it, would be to ensure that the people who engage with tourists are Caymanian, right? And so that there's a transfer, there's a experience that the tourists, and I think tourists come here to, they want that Cayman experience. If you have someone who has no sort of appreciation for local culture, etc., then it's much less likely that they're going to get the experience that they came here to get. And if we are going to move towards, which is where I believe we need to move towards, quality over quantity, part of that package needs to be enhancing the quality of our Caymankind brand. The way we do that is by making sure that those folks who are engaging directly with tourists are fit and proper persons to do that. I don't mean to disparage anyone. I'm just saying fit and proper in the sense that they actually are able to give the tourist the experience that the tourist wants, right? Because after all, it's no good branding it Caymankind if it's some other kind of experience. That's all I'm saying.
Authenticity. We're speaking to candidate number 1 on the ballot in Red Bay, Sammy Jackson, as you take us through your manifesto, remind us of some of the things that sort of got us where we are, but then how do we go forward? I think I give you credit for recognizing not just the interest of the voters, but their intelligence. Our voters, oftentimes when the politicians look at us as being stupid.
Oh, I can tell you, Dwayne.
Yeah.
From my experience, Red Bay has a lot of intelligent voters.
Yeah,
a lot of professional folks, a lot of savvy folks. You don't need to be a professional to be smart. There's a lot of people, and they're the encouraging thing is that, and whether this gets me elected or not, I honestly mean this. The encouraging thing is that people are now more willing to engage in politics, perhaps because they're feeling the pinch of harsh economic times, or they're wondering what went wrong because they hear all this angry discussion about this and that government initiative. But whatever it is, they are very engaged and attuned to the issues, and they ask a lot of pertinent questions. At a town hall meeting the other night, the Seafarers Hall, it was filled with people. Right, they literally came in and they had me there on the stage until 11:30 or something like that, asking questions. And I can tell you, it was intelligent dialogue. Right,
meaningful, impactful. But respectfully, to your credit too, I think it speaks to the willingness to listen, to engage, and to show the respect that the voters deserve. Oftentimes, you go to political meetings, just speaking in the past, and it's entertainment. It's at times condescending. It's almost belittling of the electorate, of the voters, right? From what you're sharing, you're engaging and ensuring that the voters have a voice and understand that as a representative, your job is, like you say, as a lawyer, take instructions, listen to them.
It's part, it's occupational habit, if I'm being honest about it. To represent people, and I've represented a wide array of citizens of this country, all across this country, in a wide array of things over time. Although my focus in recent years has been on development planning, real estate matters, administrative law matters. But the first step in taking instructions is listening to your client, right? So, and I've said this many times before, but I guess it's worthy of repetition. You cannot understand, you cannot even begin to represent someone unless you understand what their issues are. Right?
You got to listen to do that.
You have to listen to do it. You have to meet them. You have to talk to them. You have to engage with them. Don't assume you know what their problems are, because you don't. Don't assume that they're going to post it on a WhatsApp chat with 500 other people on it. They're not going to do that either. They want one-on-one. I can tell you, if the election was stretched out until August, Dwayne, I would probably be still meeting with folks in Red Bay until then, because every time I go to a house expecting to be there 10, 15 minutes, it's an hour, 2 hours. Because sometimes people simply want to talk, and I feel obliged to listen.
Yeah, man.
And they have given me valuable input, a lot of them. And you have to respect the views of these people. They simply need an outlet. They need to engage, and they deserve that.
Well, it's your testimony.
Right? They really deserve that, and they have lots of questions, primarily because the government of the day is not in the business of answering questions. This, sort of entrenched indifference to the voting populace, that somehow all of a sudden, right before elections, you hear that they want to engage. Even when they don't even have a public meeting in the district, right? My opponent hasn't had one yet. He's gone on other people's platforms and done all sorts of silly drunken dances and stuff and talking about Sammy Dade and all the kind of foolishness. But other than that, he's not really, and yard meetings here and there in Red Bay and select locations. I don't want to be selective. I've been knocked on just about every door in that district now, right? I've only been probably to 30 or 40% of them inside their house, right? But I've spoken to a lot of folks and I've learned a lot along the way. And one of the things that's concerning Red Bay right now is the proliferation of development. And that leaves me with the last topic on my manifesto in terms of general things that affect the country, which is development, infrastructure, and its impact on the environment. Now, we recently had a short-circuited application for massive development brought by Mr. Ergun Berksoy, a gentleman who, based on his connections, I believe we could probably rest assured is close to the government, who has the CPA literally approved a massive subdivision. I think it's some 62 or 64 acres. I haven't seen the modified plans, that's part of the complaint, in that because of the way that the PPM government modified the legislation, the planning legislation in 2014, 2016, they literally created a short-circuited process where large-scale major developments are approved in the same manner as a single-family home. No special criteria, no special process, no special investigation, no consideration for infrastructural or environmental impacts. None of that. And I'll explain what I mean by what they did in a minute. But in terms of that project, right, that has major implications in terms of traffic and in terms of potential flooding. And there's been no study that I have been told about. I've seen many plans, many versions of plans that were presented. I don't know where they came from, so I can't speak to the accuracy of any of them. But there's a lot of stuff flowing around on social media. I've spoken to a number of concerned residents in the Red Bay area. They're all very concerned about what that means, because Red Bay largely is a very low-lying area with already serious flooding problems that have not been attenuated, although I believe they could be easily fixed, right? Through mechanical means, perhaps they would involve some significant expenditure. But all of the low-lying areas that came in, particularly now with higher tides, etc., and global sea level rise, we need to figure out how we're going to protect those areas from massive seasonal flooding, right? Or occasional flooding when we have king tides, what have you. Those are the things that affect this area. The citizens are concerned not just about the implication of development, but the implications of how easy it was, right? The revelation that it was very easy to get that project passed. How did that happen? Well, there were plans that were put in that were objected to by a handful of people, and the only reason that a handful of people objected was because the PPM government in 2014, 2016 made it so that only a small number of residents within a 450-foot radius of that development needed to be notified. Even though the implications, the knock-on effects, the possible adverse effects of that development could range far, far afield from 450 feet from the boundaries of the development. And so about 3 people objected officially. They had 21 days. That's the other thing. They've limited the amount of the radius of the notification area. They've truncated the time frame to 21 days. You have to know if you object on the 21st day, even if the planning hearing isn't until 2 months down the line, they say it's too late. Wow. That I believe is a breach of natural justice. Because that's implemented by regulation, right? So that's one of the many things that needs to be fixed. But this has all been done to benefit major developments by allowing them to be rubber stamped effectively. And what happened with this one was the original plans were objected to by a handful of people, centered around some environmental concerns vis-a-vis a pond and some flooding issues, etc. And when they went to the planning hearing, the architect showed up with a new plan that hasn't been served on anyone else yet, which is a no-no. That simply can't. That is flagrant breach of natural justice. And you know what the CPA did? They approved it.
So would it be
They approved it on the basis that the objectors who were sitting in the room were happy with it, or appeared to be happy with it, or were, I don't know, persuaded to accept it. I don't know, right? But the worry there is that there might be other people now who are more adversely affected by the new plans than the old ones, who are not even consulted.
Divide and conquer almost.
Well, it's a process where you are able to short circuit is the best term I can think of.
Appease one group and
and the problem we have is the immediate problem we have is we had from 2001 to 2014 a special provision in the planning legislation. It was then Section 6, and that section said that there was a special process for major developments. It defined what major developments were, and it said these things had to be taken into account. Infrastructural impacts. It empowered the CPA to conduct, and it said the CPA shall, when it's dealing with major developments as defined, consider infrastructural impacts, consider impacts of matters of national importance, consider anything of a technical nature, and conduct any necessary inquiries into satisfying itself to any of these things. So it was an enhanced process that literally was intended to put major developments under the microscope to make sure that recognizing, as any sensible jurisdiction should do, that there are infrastructural and environmental impacts that come from major developments that cannot be associated with small developments. And the government of the day, in November 2014, 11 months after that same government gave us the National Conservation Law and patted themselves on the back for being champions of the environment, they gutted the planning legislation to allow the CPA to short-circuit the process for major developments, which are the biggest threat to conservation in this country. So you talk about legislative hypocrisy, there it is. And I can prove every word of this because I've saved every piece of legislation, that planning legislation that was promulgated since 1998 when I left government. Everyone. In fact, before that, 95. Right? And to think that they got away with that and no one noticed. I did. I pointed it out to many people. But no one cares to hear my complaint anymore. This government is of a mindset that it wants to hear nothing from anyone other than its own recognized people.
An echo chamber almost.
It is. Indeed.
All right. Mr. Jackson, with that, we'll pause and take a break with our news. When we come back, candidate number 1, Samuel Jackson for Red Bay. Stay tuned.
At Subway, we know a meal isn't quite complete without a side, and that's why we're introducing waffle fries. Subway's waffle fries are oven-baked softness with extra crispy edge, giving a satisfying taste to be enjoyed as is or in any of Subway's dipping sauces. Order waffle fries as a side item for $2 or make it a meal deal with any sandwich or salad with a 20-ounce drink and waffle fries for an additional $3 or a 30-ounce or bottle drink and waffle fries for an additional $3.50. Subway, eat fresh.
I'm looking for a new pizza joint with that perfect crust. My car needs a bit of a tune-up, and my pregnant wife needs something from the pharmacy. So I turned to the printed yellow directory, and in an instant, the pizzas are ordered, the oil change is booked, and the thing that I'm not allowed to say out loud has been purchased for my wife. Problem solved. When you need something quick, do yourself a favor. Flip through the printed yellow directory. Stop searching, start finding. Yellow, we know local.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
Follow Radio Cayman on Twitter. All the latest information, breaking news, community events, and more. Follow us at twitter.com/Radio Cayman.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have, on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. Nominations are now being accepted for the 2020 Outstanding Service Awards for the Office of the Commissioner of Police. Additional information is available at rcips.ky. In international news, people diagnosed with COVID-19 in the previous 6 months were more likely to develop depression, dementia, psychosis, and stroke, researchers have found. A third of those with a previous COVID infection went on to develop or have a relapse of a psychological or neurological condition. Former top-ranking officers in the Turkish army have been jailed for life in a mass trial of 497 defendants accused over the failed July 2016 coup. Among those convicted were 2 men who stormed the public broadcaster to have the coup declared on live TV. Tens of thousands of people have been held since the failed coup, which killed 251 civilians. Amazon boss Jeff Bezos has said he supports raising taxes on U.S. companies. The comments by the world's richest man come as U.S. President Joe Biden is pushing to raise the corporate rate from 21% to 28%. The rise would help pay for a massive spending plan to upgrade America's roads, ports, water pipes, and internet. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
Follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Honey, our fridge has stopped working again. Everything in the freezer is melting. We need to get this repaired right away. I'm calling Brand Source Service.
When you need the very best appliance service, call Brand Source Service at 623-5000. Offering service and installation of all brands and models of appliances. Brand Source Service is Cayman's source for appliance parts and repairs with qualified and experienced technicians and the island's largest stock of appliance parts. Brand Source Service will have your repair completed in a flash. So, whatever the problem is, call the experts at 623-5000. Brand Source Service, Dorsey Drive, Industrial Park. Telephone 623-5000.
Why work with a Suriba agent? We can tell you that those letters represent a proven understanding of the real estate market in the Cayman Islands. But it also means so much more than that. Our trained Suriba agents are committed to ethics, integrity, and excellence of practice. It's all about confidence, knowing you are working with a qualified Suriba agent. As members of Suriba, your trust is our promise. To find a Suriba agent today or to search thousands of listens, visit Suriba.com. Suriba, the mark of excellence in real estate.
Every vote will count in our April 14th general election.
There are many reasons why we should vote. Education, jobs, the environment, healthcare, just to name a few. Cast your vote and make a difference. A public service announcement from your #1 community station, Radio Cayman.
But I do have some questions.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program. Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, and thanks for joining us in the studio. Candidate number 1 on the ballot in Red Bay, Sammy Jackson. Hey, thanks again for sharing with us. It's a lot to run a campaign. It's a lot of, out of the whole sort of team to go around, to speak to people, to engage. But I commend you for not just the resilience, but the respect that you're showing the voters in Red Bay, and listening, talking, engaging, understanding. How, just like you take instructions, you say as a lawyer, from your prospective clients. So.
Well, I suppose Dwayne has the benefit of me being told that I'm from outside the district. I mean, the funny thing is, no matter where I would have run, I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
But I felt the need to get to know people, and I that wasn't because of what was being said. This ridiculous statement about why are you in Red Bay? You should be in West Bay, which I find insulting, to say the least.
That's all it came on.
I thought I was a Caymanian. I was allowed to go wherever I could, or I wanted to go in Cayman, and I've represented, as I said earlier, people across this country. I have lots of friends in Red Bay, and And if I choose one day, I've lived in Red Bay
Yeah.
before for a year, if that counts for anything. And I pretty much know my way around Red Bay now, very well. So, but the most important thing of all is not where you live, but what you do. Right? And what you don't do. And the way you do it. And I've been trying my best to connect to as many people as possible in the shortened time frame that we have. It's a challenge. It really is a challenge. It's stressful in that there's many days, because that means there's certain times a day you can't go because folks are at work, etc. And so I sort of have to budget my time to doing research, preparing for meetings, that sort of thing. And I still have, a thriving law firm that I have to manage somehow. And so it's not been easy. It really hasn't, but I intend to do my best, do it to the best of my ability. And I really value the feedback I've gotten. Without that, I'd be just speaking in a vacuum,
Exactly. Well, it shows from what you shared that it's not only national issues, but issues, particular to Red Bay. You talked about the flooding, the impact on the social fabric, but also the environmental as well as the infrastructure concerns. With that, just that one, other development. As you said, I was reminded of someone who earlier said to me, perhaps some of the voters in certain areas, and certainly the politicians in those areas, the song that they should be singing, that country song, is not what I did, is what I didn't do.
Yeah.
But anyway, I like my country.
So what do? We were talking before the break about the sad state of affairs with regards to development, which is my area of specialty. So because of these things that were done in 2014 and 2016 in particular, we have seen the proliferation of many major developments. The government champions that as as a way to enhance the economic wealth of the country, and to some extent, in an ideal world, that would be true. But if you are, and I know they've denied this, that they haven't done any concession deals in this administration, that remains to be seen. My information is otherwise, but until I see something, I can't speak to it. But one thing is for sure: if major development isn't doing what it ought to do, what other jurisdictions dictate it must do, in particular the UK, where this whole idea of a Section 6 came from, and I'll explain the background on that in a minute, which is to make sure that the government's job is to ensure that where large-scale developments are concerned, that it takes into account the process, the planning process, takes into account all infrastructural impacts, in particular, all environmental impacts, and that there is compensation for infrastructural upgrades dictated by that development, and there's mitigation offered for environmental damage or impacts. We're doing the opposite. We literally removed the provision, and an important and integral part of the process that I just described, from the legislation to allow developments to be simply approved, right? As if it's a foregone conclusion that they're a good thing and that there are no adverse impacts. And what you're seeing now, right, as these projects are being built out, particularly in the Red Bay, around the Red Bay area, around the bottleneck that affects the traffic in the Red Bay and Prospect areas, and all of the eastern districts, if we're being honest about it, is the proliferation of large-scale developments, some along the coastline, some behind Grand Harbour, where you have a multitude of high-density residential developments going on that have not yet come online. We are in a border-closed situation where we don't have the usual complement of visitors driving up and down our roads. Those projects have not come online as yet. So can you imagine when we return to normalcy and all of those projects are now operational, are then operational, and you have hundreds of cars leaving from there, and if you then add to that the new Berkshire development, right? And I know the government of the day is saying it's going to make a 6-lane highway now in front of Hurley's. They figured out how to do that. They haven't yet addressed the single lane that it all bottlenecks into down by Bobby Thompson Way. Although they say they're going to address that too. There's lots of stuff they're thinking about looking into now, right at the very end of what is basically been an 8-year span, 8-year run.
Someone says election every year, man. You get things done.
Indeed. But what you're going to see is a significant amount of gridlock, right? An unprecedented, I believe, amount of gridlock. Far beyond what we used to experience coming out of West Bay before the ETH was built. You'll remember that, Dwayne. It took us an hour plus to get to town, or sometimes 2 hours to get to town. But what you're going to see there, and particularly at the Raid Bay area and Prospect areas where they are only connected to the main highway system by 2 feeder roads, feeding into massive roundabouts, which seems, and these feeder roads seem to be connected as an afterthought. I'm no traffic expert. But if you look at it on Google Earth, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Look at it from an aerial photograph. There was no intent to create traffic fluidity coming out of those roads in Raid Bay, where some 4,000 houses are, right? Raid Bay Prospect area. And so you have traffic backing up, not just along the main road going up all the way, Spot Street and beyond, but you have traffic backing up in the Raid Bay area. If you add the Berkside development to that, where their access points are connected on the one side to Grand Harbour through this road that the Premier got himself in problems with the other day with the Davenport people. And on the other side, you're dumping it into Admiral's Landing, right? You're going through a roadway that's a path that's already there, connecting that and making that then this basically the 2 points of egress and ingress to and from that development, which is massive and has multiple apartment pads built into it, apartment lots built into it. You're going to see a complete mess of traffic in that whole entire area. And then comes the drainage issue. That area apparently is currently a drainage basin because it's basically largely wetland or seasonal wetland at least. And the approach generally to those developments is you turn that into a watershed area, so you drain all of the water from the perimeter of the development inwards and put it into the ground. But when you do that, you have to berm. They talk about swales. Berm, swales, basically a gully. But in creating that swale, you got to berm it on the outside. So what that means is that land water that's running off of land surrounding that, which is Selkirk Drive and Admirals, etc., isn't going to be able to run into there anymore. So you're going to have enhanced flooding in those areas. And it doesn't seem to be, that would demonstrate exactly the sort of thing that Section 6 would have had to dictate that the CPA would take into account if that piece of legislation hadn't been butchered by the PPM government. If Section 6 were there and one of those objectors said, hey, see this provision here? This requires you to conduct a special inquiry into the infrastructural impacts regarding this, that flow from this development, including flooding. They would have had to take it into account, or they would have erred in law, and the decision would have been what we call Wensbury unreasonable. And it would have been overturned on appeal, hopefully. But because that process doesn't exist anymore, this short-circuited process was allowed that project to be simply rubber stamped, and now the people of Raid Bay are going to have to deal with that. Right? Wow. And I hope that this government, who claims to be, promoting a safer, stronger future, that they have part of that safer, stronger future involves planning for those sorts of things. Because if they have plans, again, I haven't seen them, I haven't heard about them. Their plans seem to be rearward looking. Everything is reactionary. That's exactly what got us in the blacklist and the grey list too. You react when something adverse happens, when something you should have foreseen coming. But yet they get to tell the public, oh, look at us. Me and my 11 disciples, we're the better option. We're the only option. The rest of those guys, yeah, there might be a smart one over there and a bright one over there and an educated one over there, but don't worry about them. They don't know what they're doing. It's us or nothing. And if you can, after you have done all that this government has done, with the Smith-Barker fiasco, with the Cruz Port referendum fiasco, with this development, with all these other things where they have shown total indifference, total indifference to the wishes of the people, the concerns of even the Premier's own constituency. If that earns him the title of a better, safer future, being the proponent of that, then I don't know what to say. I can tell you this though, I have a fix for this. I can promise you that, provided I can get the consensus, and I believe I can build the consensus to implement the necessary changes. I certainly have agreement among the folks that I'm aligned with, some 6 of them, that we will return Section 6 to the legislation immediately. Not within the first 100 days, within the first 20 or so, hopefully. Because that needs to go back in there, because that was just purely legislative butchery with a specific design in mind, right? And that we will change the planning legislative regime to promote a more sustainable, promote and enforce sustainable development. Because when you look at the development plan, that concept is built in there already. The development plan talks about protecting and enhancing the quality of life for the people of the Cayman Islands. The development plan isn't about dictating how buildings are built. It's about dictating how to control planning so that it doesn't harm the social. This is the things that are listed: social, economic, welfare of the people of the country and the environment. Right? That's the primary objective of the plan, and we seem to have forgotten that or simply ignored it. Part of that whole regime needs to be enhancing the legislation. So this is going further along. When we start to enhance the legislation, we need to implement a process that takes account directly in the planning process itself the environment. Because right now, the only thing that provides for that is the National Conservation Law, and there's this sort of imperfect dovetailing of the functions of the NCC with the CPA. And so the National Conservation Council, through the DOE, has to give reports, provide reports for on each, and those reports can be ignored unless the NCC issues a directive under Section 41 of the National Conservation Law to shut the process down, which I believe is draconian and I don't believe is sustainable. But I understand why it was put there, because we have had to create this sort of adjunct system to try to regulate the planning approval process so as to take into account the environmental concerns, valid environmental concerns of the National Conservation Council. We need to find a way to merge that process. One of the ways we do that is we create a planning authority that's separate and apart from the ministry. Right now you have a department that's answerable to a CEO, right? When in fact that, if you look at the Public Authorities Law, that dictates a new system of governance vis-a-vis these public authorities. They need to be independent of government. They're appointed by cabinet, the members of the board, the directors, whatever. But they're appointed based on meritocracy, not cronyism, right? Not the guy who promoting you or whatever. They need to be qualified in the relevant fields, and they need to be absent any conflicts of interest. If you do that, and you segregate the department from the ministry and you put it as the secretariat of the board, the way the ICTA used to be set up before we went and tinkered with that, then you'll have a functioning, modern type of regulatory authority that can do the business it needs to be done in a fair, balanced, and sustainable manner. We don't have that now. What we have is a disjointed process based on archaic legislation that we've bolted on things onto and taken things out of as we see fit for special interests. The term legislative tinkering was coined by me, probably someone else, but in the Cayman context. In many a meeting, I've been frustrated because when you look at what has been done to the legislation to render it inoperable, right? That is the only term that can come to mind. Governments of the past have tinkered with legislation. I can tell you, Dwayne, I have been instructed as a lawyer to draft some of those provisions. Privilege prevents me from discussing any further than that. I had a job to do. I was asked to draft a piece of legislation, and it's submitted, and it's approved by the parliamentary process. But we shouldn't be doing it that way. The whole development planning regime is based on under Section 2 of the law, or on a consultative process taking place. That then produces a development plan and amendments to the development plan, something we haven't done in over 20 years, again. And that then is the basis, the platform from which all planning control springs forth. And we then have the legislation providing how that is implemented. But we have too many people involved in the process, and it is a bit esoteric, and it can be very technical. But we don't have enough people involved in the process that knows what they're doing. They come with their own ideas about how things need to be done. They talk a lot about things that they think should be implemented, and then they generally slide into this approach. Well, if it's not being done this way, this is how it ought to be done. Well, hello. If you are going to do that, right? Yeah. If you're going to do that, then you might as well not have a law. And if you're, as a government, if you're going to butcher the law and amend it as you see fit, then it defeats the whole purpose of having a law in the first place. Yeah. The purpose of the law is to, as Section 5 of the Development Plan Law, secure consistency and continuity. It's all about fairness. Yeah. So everybody knows far out what the position is at law. They can then develop their plans accordingly. But if it's going to change every 6 months because, Joe Blow or whoever wants some special consideration, some special project approved, right, without, the troublesome and bothersome provisions, meeting those troublesome provisions that would preclude it, if you're going to do that as a government, you might as well not have planning control. That's not planning. That's organized chaos, engineered chaos even. And that's what we're confronted with here, right? And, I have made a living off of interpreting this legislation, right? And I've seen all of its shortcomings. But I'm here to tell you, truthfully, it is in a worse state now than it ever was, and deliberately so.
Because of legislative tinkering.
They have literally made it, built into the appeals provisions, for example, is an inherent threat of getting awarded punitive costs, right? On an indemnity basis if you file what the appeals tribunal might call a frivolous or vexatious appeal. That is put there to deter people from filing appeals, and I can tell you it's had effect. I know sophisticated clients of mine who are fervently against a project, who because I have a duty to show that to them. They say, well, we don't really want to go to court, we end up in grand court, and we get hit with $100,000 legal bill.
On top of their own.
On top of their own bill, right? So it is working as the government intended, as a deterrent. And what it does is it provides a glide path to rubber stamping of large projects. That's what it's all about. This isn't by accident. This is not by incompetence. This is by design. They have literally decided that they needed to do this to promote the wholesale, unbridled style of development we have in this country. I know other projects, some which have attracted the scorn of the media, funnily enough, that are put through the ringer. This is the weird thing, right? They've been put through the ringer by the CPA, by the planning department, because they were controversial from the outset. And here's the worst part. Some of those projects are controversial, not because of what they are, not of what they do in terms of impact, but because of who is involved. So once the media sees it's some sensational dude that's doing it, that gets attention, and other much more impactful projects get approved without any sort of media scrutiny. That's sad too, because if the media isn't holding them accountable and they focus only myopically on one project, then all other things will get slid by, right? Because there is a sense of different strokes for different folks in this country when it comes to planning control and many other things. So how do we call ourselves a free democratic society if we have all that? Because all those things are the stock and trade of a third world country,
A banana republic in making.
A banana republic without bananas. We don't even have bananas, doing. What we're going to do?
They have green bananas.
Yeah, well, we have a few, but not enough. So the other thing I don't know if I even mentioned this, national parks. There's a lot of talk about Barkers, the Haida Barkers needing to be made a national park. That needs to be implemented. That can be implemented, I believe, under the NCL, the National Conservation Law. We should move to do that so that you don't even need to worry about development. You just invest that in perpetuity in an entity along the lines of a national trust. I would recommend not putting it in the Crown because they tend to sell stuff, when they get desperate. The government. We need to promote marine life protection.
Yeah.
The reefs are under attack. My good friend Courtney Platt, he prevails on me every day since I've been on Facebook. So he, kudos to him. This man has committed his life to helping us see the error of our ways, and we still turn a blind eye to it. That's that.
Yeah.
That needs to be part of it, because the jurisdiction, contrary to popular belief, the jurisdiction of the planning authority does not and need not end at the high water mark. That's what needs to be borne in mind. That is also a myth. We need to, and this is important, we need to enhance, and this is separate and apart from the planning legislation itself, we need to enhance all necessary legislation to enshrine and protect all public rights, including prescriptive accesses to the beach, the prescriptive use of the beach, and access to the sea. And our use of the beach is what it needs to be understood about that is the same legislation, that old circa 1830s legislation, the prescription law that has been in the Commonwealth forever and withstood the test of time. That legislation needs to be enhanced so that any member of the public who is told they can't use a beach access, that they indefeasibly have a right to use, and consequently can't use the beach, because it's the same legislation that protects the public's right to use the beach, that they can file a suit, a complaint.
You can't get to the beach, how do you use it?
I drafted an amendment to the prescription law in 2017 and gave it to the opposition. They were willing to put it forward, and then withdrew it on the basis that they were promised by the then planning minister, Mr. Tibbetts, that there were amendments coming to the registered land law. The problem with that is the registered land law, the prescriptive easements recognized by the registered land law, are separate and apart from the ones that exist under prescription law. They're two totally different types of prescriptive easements. One is owned by a piece of land. It's a right in rem, as you know. And the other one is enjoyed and engrossed by all members of the public that have used that access. And that law says that right is indefeasible. If you don't know what that is, look it up in the dictionary. Okay? That means you can't move it. You can't amalgamate it. You can't touch it. It's sacrosanct. You need to leave it alone. And to those, and I don't care who they are, who have bought land, knowing full well that there are beach accesses there that existed before you heard about Cayman, well, that's your folly. You shouldn't come and expect now the government to breach the rights of the public, right? In order to enhance the value of the land you bought with those things in situ.
But we've done that.
That's and we have allowed that.
We've done that.
And I've looked at decisions, right, where conveniently or otherwise, the public prescriptive easements under the prescription law and the ones under the registered land law have been conflated and confused with each other. They're two different things. One is able to be modified under Section 96 of the registered land law. The other one is simply indefeasible. It's can't be moved, right? And that we need to get folks to understand that is the position at law, right? And if there's obviously been no political will to champion that cause, quite the opposite. They passed legislation, amendments to the planning legislation, which talks about dedicated rights of way, which is again another confusion or conflation, because a dedicated right of way can be born through that process, but once it's open and used for 20 years, then the prescription law kicks in anyhow. So no matter if you change the legislation, the planning legislation, you can't change the effect of the prescription law. And that needs to be understood, right, and accepted by the relevant stakeholders, because if there's one thing that Caymanians are going to rise up about, it's that. The day you tell us that we can't use that beach, and the other thing we need to do is identify what the beach is, because you got all kinds of confusion about what that is. You know, the line before the foreshore and this and that, and the high water mark and all this. But you know what? There's old case law that says it's from the original vegetation line. And if that's what we need to do, we got aerial photography.
We go back to that.
That goes back to the 50s for the West Bay Peninsula at least. We can determine what the original vegetation line is, and we can plot that and put it on a map and say, this is the prescriptive public use area.
Which is not just an even flow between the tides.
We don't need to amend no law. We don't need to have no committee to do that, right? We simply need, create a process. We don't need anyone to regulate. It's enforceable by law, by action in the court. And if that's what it's necessary, then that's what's necessary.
But
so
political will needs to be there.
Absolutely.
All right.
And it's sad that we haven't sorted that out yet. Because as a lawyer, I can tell you over the years, over the past 2.5 decades, I've had many a complaint. Even when I was at the legal department, we had to deal with that issue.
Yeah.
Right?
We see it every day, just using the beach in Mr. Jackson. Yeah.
Sorry, just to wrap up.
Yeah.
The other things would be implementation of a properly managed public transport system, supporting finally the enforcement of national energy policy. That's important. And ensuring that there's fair and proportionate compensation and or mitigation for any infrastructural or environmental impact caused by large-scale developments. It ties into what I said earlier.
Right.
Those are the things I see as important issues. And it might seem like a lot, but it actually isn't. Most of it is just conforming to the existing legislation.
Yeah.
And I would expect that any government, any legitimate government would want to do that, would want to ensure that, want to do everything it can to make sure that it's the legislation that is promulgated in this country is actually followed and enforced.
Really appreciate you taking this extended time, buying as it is the airtime to share with your constituents in Red Bay. But I think as a country we've benefited greatly. In closing, any maybe final thoughts you may want to leave for our listeners?
Just that I hope that the listening public and the wider public, that what I have said resonates with them, that they understand that there are important issues that need to be addressed. And it's not all about, just safety and security for the time being. We cannot let those things that are important to all of us sort of slide into disrepair and disregard simply because we are focused right now on a crisis that has distracted us from everything. Because that is exactly how governments get away with lots of stuff. They distract you with things. They fearmonger and cause you concern about one specific thing, and meanwhile they're doing other things. And that appears to be what's happening here. That is certainly not something that I would engage in. I believe that I would definitely not my conscience wouldn't allow me. My conscience would dictate that I take a different approach, a better approach. And so I hope doing that I am able to humbly offer my services to the country come April the 14th, and that the people of Red Bay see that I have value to bring to the table, and I intend to do that to the best of my ability, if given the opportunity. So that's all I can do at this stage, Dwayne, and I intend to do my best, whatever comes.
My friend, I wanted to call you friend, and I'll be honest with you, the honor and integrity, the respect, and the serious love that you have exhibited for the country over the years. I hope it doesn't hold against me, but you're a man who speaks his mind, stands on principle, and it's good to know that we have people like that in our country. So, to our voters, I wish we make an informed, prayerful decision to all our candidates that we elect and govern with humility, with respect, with a sense of great service to the country. So, I say to everyone, go on the polls, come election day, let's not stay away. Let's go and cast our ballots. And candidate number 1 for Red Bay, Samuel Jackson. Thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me, Dwayne.
All right. Any other meetings coming up you want to make the public know of?
Oh yes, we're having the final rally on April 10th at 233A Shamrock Road. That's the recently paved, not paved with concrete or asphalt, but paved with fill. Lot where my big sign is, right next to the jerk chicken stand and the little shop inside and next to On the Run. That's the only how I can describe it.
Saturday?
Saturday, the 10th of April at 7 o'clock.
All right. 7 p.m. this Saturday, come in at April 10th. Hey, thanks very much, man. Thanks for your company.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And to our listeners, have a wonderful, blessed, safe, productive afternoon. God's willing. Join us tomorrow.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. And Savannah Pharmacy in Countryside Shopping Village, convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays. And Royal Fidelity Bank and Trust, money at work. Now you'll never have to choose between two desserts at Subway. The new Caramel Brownie Cookie is 2 treats in 1. Imagine sweet, gooey caramel with decadent chocolate chunks baked in brownie-flavored dough and topped with a light drizzle of caramel icing. And you have the new Caramel Brownie Cookie, available at Subway. Complete your Subway sandwich, pizza, or salad with the delicious Caramel Brownie Cookie or any other cookie flavor and dessert. Available at all Subway locations. Subway. Eat fresh.
We are in an age of exponential change. The world is experiencing a technology boom where innovation is at an all-time high. What does this mean for small island nations? How can we adapt to the emerging digital revolution? Join 900 delegates from 3 Caribbean countries at one regional event to tackle the theme, Global Digital Disruption, Threat or Opportunity. The virtual RF Economic Outlook Conference happens on May 6th. Register today at rfeoc.com.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
The Department of Environment is appealing to the community to help combat the impact of stony coral tissue loss disease on the Cayman Islands reef ecosystem. Easter week is expected to see more water sports activities. Pathogens on dive gear and boats can survive for extended periods and be transferred among reefs. If you are diving or snorkeling anywhere in the Cayman Islands and before traveling between Grand Cayman and the sister islands, disinfect your gear and bilge water in a 1% bleach solution for 10 minutes before moving to a new location. For more information or to make any reports, visit doe.ky.